About a year ago, I decided to download Tinder to try and meet more people. I'm not much of a social person and don't go out much, so meeting new people doesn't happen very often for me. I downloaded the app, set up my profile, and started swiping. I spent about 20 minutes on the app before I got bored and decided to go make some food. When I got back, I noticed I matched with someone I had swiped right on. She was cute and blonde and was around my age. I was quite excited, so I decided to send her a message. I went with a simple "hey." Boring, I know, but I was new to this, so I wasn't exactly experienced with flirting. After a few minutes, she responded back. She seemed interested. We kept messaging back and forth for the next couple of hours, and we seemed to be hitting it off. She would message me constantly at all hours of the day. I could tell she was super into me. After around a week of us chatting back and forth, she suggested that we meet up. I agreed and suggested a local coffee shop in town, but she declined and recommended that we meet at her apartment instead. We set up a date and time. I nervously prepared for our first date. I got myself ready, brought some red roses to give to her, and took an Uber to her place. When I arrived, I knocked on the door and she greeted me with a smile. To my surprise and relief, she looked exactly like her pictures. Anyone who's been on dating apps would know that catfishing is not uncommon, so the thought had definitely crossed my mind once or twice. She told me to come in, and I obliged. Entering her apartment, it looked normal. It was fairly clean and neatly decorated. She offered me a drink and we chatted for a bit. The conversation was flowing nicely. It seemed like we had everything in common. She knew about all my favorite hobbies and interests, and told me that she was equally interested in them as I was. It was almost as though she was the female version of me. We talked, drank, watched TV, and just hung out, enjoying each other's company. We were hanging out in her room for a bit, and I needed to go to the bathroom. She pointed me in the direction of it. It was just down the hall. I got up, went to the bathroom, and did my thing. When I finished up, I headed back to her room, but accidentally opened the wrong door. She lived in a 2-bedroom apartment, so I mistook the second bedroom for hers. They were both right next to each other. But thank God I opened that door. When I opened it and looked inside, I was terrified at what I saw. It was almost an empty room, covered with photos of me. There must have been hundreds, all stuck to the wall. This disturbed me to the core. It looked like some sort of cult ritual. I shut the door and ran into the living room to grab my things. She could tell something was up by now. She exited her room and called my name, asking what I was doing. I told her I had a family emergency and left in a hurry. I ran down the street to call an Uber someplace far, so that she didn't try and follow me. When I got home, she had sent me a bunch of texts, angry texts. They were obsessive. There must have been hundreds of them. I blocked her and deleted my Tinder profile. Thankfully, I didn't give her any of my personal information, so she wasn't able to contact me or show up to my house. I now always use extra caution when meeting new people. This happened to me about a month ago, and I'm still unable to move past it. I was bored, single, and browsing on Tinder, as many my age do. I had matched with a few people, but most matches didn't make it past the texting stage. This night, though, I matched with someone who I really hit it off with. He was pretty attractive, but what caught my attention was how charming he was. We texted back and forth for a few weeks, and I got to know him pretty well. We both agreed that we should meet up, and he suggested that I come over. He was supposedly a great cook and wanted to make me his signature dish, Wasn't the smartest move for me to go meet him at his home, but at this time, I didn't notice any of the red flags. I dressed myself in my nicest outfits and texted my friends his home address in case anything happened. I started driving to his house and let him know I was on the way. He didn't text me back, which I thought was strange. He was usually a very quick texter, but I figured he was likely busy making dinner. I couldn't have been more wrong. When I pulled up to his house, I was mortified. There were police cars surrounding the place and caution tape everywhere. I was terrified that something had happened to him, so I got out of my car and approached a police officer, asking what happened. No one would give me any details. I went home and never got a text from him. The next day, I found out on the news that he had been arrested for kidnapping. They found a girl tied up in his basement just minutes before I arrived, and I was meant to be his second victim. I am still terrified at the thought of what could have happened to me had the police not arrested him when they did. I'm now in therapy to work through all of this. All I can say is, never meet a stranger for the first time at their home. Always meet in a public place. I've used many dating apps over the years to meet new people. I'm a very social person, so I often use dating apps to make new friends, as well as search for a potential partner. This one guy I matched with, we'll call him Jace, was a very nice and energetic guy who liked to party. He was my age as well, so I knew we'd likely get along. One night on the weekend, I got a message from Jace. It was an invite to a party taking place at an abandoned farmhouse just outside of the city. He said over 100 people were expected to show up. With nothing else to do, I got myself ready and headed towards the address. After 40 minutes of driving out of the city, I got into some dirt roads. It was dark. There were no city lights out there, just thick forest. I continued to follow my Google Maps until I pulled up to a big abandoned building. However, the building looked deserted. It was abandoned, of course, but there was not a person in sight, let alone a huge party happening. I figured I got the address wrong and texted Jace, telling him I had gotten lost. I was hoping he could help direct me in the right direction. That's when I heard a loud knock at my car window. I looked up and saw several men surrounding my car. It was so dark that I didn't notice them approaching me as I was texting. They started yelling at me, saying to get out of the car and to come quietly. I knew that if I got out of the car, I would likely be harmed. I quickly put the car in reverse and slammed on the gas pedal, nearly hitting one of the men. They started yelling and chasing after my car. It was difficult to drive in reverse with almost zero visibility, but I didn't want to risk taking any time to turn the car around. Once I got far away enough and made it onto a paved road again, I turned my car around and floored it. I didn't want to go home in case I was followed, so I pulled into a local gas station and called the police. They checked out the abandoned site, but the men were already gone by the time they got there. They told me that I wasn't the first to make a report about those men. Supposedly others had been lured to that building, only to be robbed. When I looked up Jace's Tinder profile, it had been deleted. It was likely a fake profile, but I still told the police the name and description of the man in the profile. I haven't used any dating apps since. I'm so scared whenever I think of that night. And meeting people has become very difficult for me. You never know the intentions of the strangers on the internet.